In this lesson, we will summarize colonial resistance to British taxation, trace the mounting tension in Massachusetts as we begin to take steps towards the war for independence. The colonies organized to resist Britain. To reduce the debt from the French and Indian War, we've already discussed that Britain imposes more taxes on the colonists. After the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act of 1765 is passed. Colonists had to purchase special stamped paper for every legal document, license, and newspapers. It also imposed stamp duties on playing cards and dice. This was a direct tax, which meant that the colonists paid for it when they bought whatever was being taxed. Colonists who disobeyed were tried in court and convicted and treated as criminals. The colonists react to this tax. They organize a secret group called the Sons of Liberty. The founder of the Sons of Liberty is Samuel Adams, who is a political activist. The Sons of Liberty harassed customs workers and stamp agents and tried to prevent stamps from being sold, and they sometimes used violent tactics and scare tactics in order to do this. Individual assemblies react. The colonies act as one. Patrick Henry and the Virginia Assembly pass a resolution that Virginians could only be taxed by their own assembly, not by the king. Other assemblies from other colonies will do the same thing and unite for the Stamp Act Congress. 9 colonies meet together and issue a Declaration of Rights and Grievances. They insist that Parliament cannot impose taxes on the colonists because they were not represented by Parliament. No taxation without representation will become a battle cry. Merchants in New York, in Boston, and in Philadelphia begin to boycott British goods and refuse to buy them until the Stamp Act is repealed. Britain does eventually repeal the Stamp Act in 1766, but at the same time they issued the Declaratory Act, which says that Britain still has the right to make laws and the colonies still have to obey them. You can see on the map here that Boston, New York City, and Philadelphia were all boycotting British goods. The Townshend Acts, 1767. The Townshend Act was an indirect tax on imported materials like glass, lead, paint, paper, as they came into the colonies, which means that the taxes were imposed when they first came in, not when the colonists actually bought the items. The Townshend Acts also imposed a 3-cent tax on tea, which was the most popular drink in the colonies. Again, colonists protest, no taxation without representation. Women join the boycott, and they stop buying cloth and begin to spin their own. Conflict with merchants. In 1768, the British agents seized a ship called the Liberty, saying that wine was being smuggled without paying tax. The ship was owned by John Hancock. The colonists become very angry and riot. The British respond by stationing 2,000 redcoats, or British soldiers, in Boston to try to keep peace. The Boston Massacre. British soldiers were poorly paid and competed with colonists for jobs. One day, on the docks, an African Indian dock worker named Crispus Attucks led laborers in harassing and protesting against British soldiers. British troops opened fire and killed him and 4 other colonists. The Sons of Liberty called it the Boston Massacre and described it as a British attack on defenseless citizens. The committees of correspondence were then organized as a communication network between the colonies to communicate about threats to American liberties. The picture that you see on the video was an engraving that was created by Paul Revere. This represented the Boston Massacre, as the Sons of Liberty wanted to share it. You can see the British soldiers, the redcoats, here in red, and then you can also see the colonists shown here as defenseless citizens. Boston Tea Party. The British East India Company had a monopoly on tea in America. The boycotts by the colonists were bankrupting the company. The Prime Minister, Lord North, passes the Tea Act. The Tea Act cut colonial merchants out of the tea trade and allowed the company to sell tea directly to consumers for less money. On December 16, 1773, members of the Sons of Liberty, disguised as Native Americans, and dumped 18,000 pounds of tea into Boston Harbor, which is what you see in this picture. Britain responds by passing the Intolerable Acts. King George III and Parliament were furious after the Boston Tea Party. They passed the Intolerable or Coercive Acts, which said that Boston Harbor was closed until the dumped tea was paid for. They issued the Quartering Act, which authorized British soldiers to be housed in private homes. General Gage, who is seen in this picture, was appointed governor of Massachusetts, and he placed Boston under martial law, which is rule by military forces. No town meetings were allowed. The committees of correspondence then react. They assembled the first Continental Congress in Philadelphia in 1774. There were 56 delegates whose names are all shown here, along with the states that they represented. You can see here the advertisement from New York that lists the people that they were sending to the First Continental Congress, and then you can in turn see their names signed here. They drew up a Declaration of Colonial Rights defending their right to run their own affairs. They stated that if the British used force against the colonies, then the colonies were going to fight back, and they agreed to reconvene in 1775 in Philadelphia if their demands were not met. This is Independence Hall, where the First Continental Congress took place.